Welcome to the deep dive. We're kicking off today with a really interesting what if idea.
hmm
What if art could do more than just hang on a wall, What if it could actually power more art right there in the community?
Okay, I'm intrigued, like art fueling itself.
Exactly. We're going to be digging into this concept of reinvestment, seeing if it could be a viable model for local art hubs.
Right, so art creating more art, basically,
Yeah.
but on a community level.
Yeah. And to really explore this, we've got quite a mix of sources lined up.
We do. There's some really imaginative stuff, what we're calling creative text that pushes the boundaries.
Okay.
We're also thinking about AI, how that might fit in, maybe as a tool or even part of the art itself.
Interesting angle.
Then there's some prose, really insightful stuff about what actually drives creativity. And importantly, we have a counterpoint.
Which is
Some pretty raw perspectives from YouTube transcripts, things talking about, well, hopelessness and this feeling of endless monetization pressure in the arts.
right, the reality check.
Definitely. It gives us a much rounder picture.
It does. And as we talk through this, we really want you, the listener, to consider some down-to-earth possibilities.
Like what?
Like, imagine this. What if, say, 10% of every single local art sale went straight into a neighborhood idea fund?
Okay, a dedicated pod just for local creativity.
Yeah. Could that money then help new artists get started, fund community projects, maybe just buy supplies for a workshop?
Practical support.
And even simpler, maybe, can those posters you see around, the cool local ones, could they actually help pay the rent for the person who designed and printed them?
If the whole process is really local, you mean?
Exactly. If it's printed by the people who actually live on the block.
These are the kinds of tangible questions that get right to the heart of this reinvestment idea, aren't they?
They really are.
So our mission today really is to pull out the key insights from all these different angles. Understand the potential, sure, but also the challenges.
The real world hurdles.
Yeah. We want to give you a clear, kind of distilled understanding of this whole concept.
Okay, so let's dive right in then. This core idea, reinvestment.
Right.
At its simplest, it's like, what if making one piece of art helped you make the next one, but also maybe help someone else down the street make their next piece?
Setting up a kind of virtuous cycle.
Yeah, almost like a closed loop of creativity within the neighborhood.
And what's really fascinating there is the potential for, well, a truly self-sustaining creative ecosystem.
Self-sustaining, okay.
Man, the very act of making and selling art directly fuels more art making nearby. It kind of shifts the focus, doesn't it?
How so?
Away from always chasing external grants or big gallery sales. It puts the power and the resources back into the local circulation.
Right, keeping it local.
Yeah.
And that big question then becomes, could a community actually fund itself this way?
Through just circulating creativity.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds maybe a little idealistic.
It can, yeah. But maybe if you break it down.
Like that 10%
Exactly. Think about that neighborhood fund again. 10% from local sales. That pool could be used for all sorts of things.
like rent for a shared studio.
Or materials for that mural project everyone's talking about. Or even just small seed grants, for artists just starting out.
Crucially, the money stays local.
And it's specifically earmarked to nurture more creativity right there. That's the key.
We were really taken by that image you mentioned earlier.
The posters paying rent.
Yeah. Posters paying rent if they're printed by the people who live on the block. So concrete.
It is, isn't it? Instead of some big company making the profit.
From local scenes or designs.
If the whole chain, from the idea to the printing to the sale, was hyper-local.
With the benefits flowing directly back.
Yeah, to the actual people involved right there. It speaks to local empowerment, doesn't it? Autonomy.
Definitely. If a community can support its own art.
It becomes less reliant on outside forces, maybe,
Yeah.
and builds more ownership, more pride in what's being created collectively.
The creative text source we looked at, it really leans into this possibility, right? These more imaginative, maybe even utopian visions.
It does. It explores the what if in a really optimistic way,
But then there's the other side.
right?
Oh.
It's not all smooth sailing.
That's where those YouTube transcripts come in, the ones about hopelessness and endless monetization. They offer a pretty stark contrast.
A necessary one, I think. They ground the discussion in the challenges artists actually face now.
Talk about that monetization pressure.
Well, this relentless drive to make money from art, sometimes it feels like it can just overshadow everything else.
Like the art itself, or the
Yeah.
community aspect.
Both. really.
Yeah.
If the only measure of success is cash, then a reinvestment model could get warped, couldn't it?
How so?
Maybe the money only flows to things that seem commercially safe or trendy. It might not nurture the weirder stuff or the less experienced voices.
Right. It could become just another market force.
Potentially. And that feeling of hopelessness in those transcripts, that's huge.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
It's this sense some artists have that, their work doesn't really matter, or that making a sustainable living from it is just impossible. A pipe dream.
And it's heavy.
It is. And if that kind of discouragement is really widespread in a community, well, it's tough to build the active, engaged network you'd need for this reinvestment thing to actually work, isn't it?
Yeah, people need to feel like participating is worthwhile, that it makes a difference.
Which brings up a really fundamental question, I think.
Okay.
How do you balance that need for financial sustainability, which is real? Artists need to eat, with the intrinsic motivations, the non-money reasons people create.
The passion, the expression.
Exactly.
Hmm.
A good reinvestment model has to address both. It can't just be about the bottom line.
So if artists feel valued
Yeah.
and that the system supports their growth, not just their sales.
That could be powerful. Maybe it helps counter that hopelessness. It shows the community is invested in them, not just their products.
It really feels like this tension is central, doesn't it? This pull between the community vision and the often harsh economics of the art world today.
Absolutely. And maybe that prose piece on creativity offers some clues here about the deeper drives.
Could be. Understanding why people create beyond needing rent money seems vital.
It's essential. If you only focus on financial returns, you might miss the whole point for many artists.
Things like self-expression, connection.
The simple joy of making something new, those things need to be valued within the system too.
Okay, so we've looked at the potential, the hurdles, the motivations. What are the key takeaways starting to emerge? How could this reinvestment idea actually become viable?
Well, one thing that seems absolutely critical is local control. Real, genuine community decision-making.
Meaning the community decides how the money gets used.
Exactly. If the people involved have a real say in where those reinvested funds go, it's much more likely to reflect their values, their priorities.
Which builds ownership, right, and encourages people to participate.
Absolutely. It can't feel like just another top-down program. It needs to grow from the ground up.
Makes sense. What are those?
Transparency, like radical transparency, and accountability.
So everyone knows where the money comes from and where it's going.
Precisely. Clear reporting on sales, on how the fund
Yeah.
is managed, what projects get supported. That builds trust, which is fundamental.
And what about tech? You mentioned AI earlier, but just digital tools in general.
Yeah, they could play a huge role. Think about platforms for local sales, making it easy for neighbors to buy from neighbors.
Lowering the barrier to entry for artists.
Definitely. And maybe AI could help manage the fund, track the sales efficiently, perhaps even help connect artists and buyers locally.
So it's not just about physical spaces, but digital infrastructure too.
I think it's a blend. You need that community connection, maybe physical hubs, but also accessible digital tools to make the mechanics work smoothly.
It sounds like building a whole new kind of infrastructure, really.
It is. And it has to be designed with the artists, with the community, centered on their needs, their values.
It's not just about the money flow.
No, it's about fostering that culture, that supportive environment of mutual aid and creative exchange.
Okay, so bringing this back to you, our listener, we've explored this idea of reinvestment in community art hubs,
We've seen the exciting potential for self-sustaining creativity
balanced against the real challenges, the pressures of money, the risk of artists feeling hopeless.
and the absolute need for things like local control and transparency.
So thinking about all these tensions, art versus money, community versus market, here's a final thought for you to mull over.
Considering everything we've discussed, what single shift, maybe in mindset, maybe in structure, do you think holds the most promise? What's the key to unlocking truly self-sustaining community art hubs today?
It's a complex one, no easy answers there.
Definitely not.
And if this whole topic has sparked your interest, maybe you want to dig deeper.
Yeah, you could look into how other community-funded things work, even outside the arts. What can we learn from them? Successes and failures.
Or explore how digital platforms are already changing art patronage. Could those models be adapted locally?
And finally, maybe just reflecting more on what really motivates creativity, both personally and within society, and how that interacts with the economic realities we all face.
Lots to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.